A young woman pays for her student loan debt in an unusual way. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today it is Short Story Tuesday, a day to talk about all the interesting short form literature that is out there. And sometimes it has a very weird and bizarre tinge to it, as per usual. Today's short story is all about student loan debt and loan sharks. I am referring to Debt by Victor LaValle, which was published in 2009-ish. For those who don't know, Victor LaValle is a Black American writer who's been writing since the early 2000s. He's written a number of books as well as short stories, various editing and anthologies and comic books as well. And he mainly writes horror. It seems like he'll write other things, but a large part of what he seems to be writing is horror. And based on what he's written in this story, I can see kind of what he's what kind of horror he's kind of leaning on there. Although whether you or not you can call this horror, I think this kind of can fall into multiple categories, but he seems primarily focused on that, and he's won a number of awards for his work, as well as ended up on a number of lists for various news publications and whatnot. It's a pretty interesting author. Hope to find more from him. This is my first time encountering his work. But without further ado, let's talk about Debt. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So, Debt focuses on Samantha Cooley. She is a young woman, a substitute teacher, who, at the beginning of the story, is avoiding calls for some unspecified reason. And finally, when she gets to her apartment, she answers her phone. And she learns that it's from her father. Her father says that someone threw a brick through their apartment or their house window, and her mother was there as well, and she heard what they were saying, which is, this is because of the debt that your daughter owes. And so the father is upset and is like, don't call us for some time. And Samantha is sad about this. She heads back to her apartment, and when she gets inside, she finds a man waiting for her. This man is Paul Horvath, which Sam recalls is the name of a man who's trying to get money from her for her student loans. It turns out Samantha, the narrator reveals that Samantha has been sort of running away from her life. She lives from sublease to sublease, not really getting on the main lease. She has her most of her clothes in storage, getting the winter and summer clothes out as needed. And Samantha has been avoiding paying any debts that she owes because she doesn't have the money to pay for it. And her substitute teacher job isn't really paying that well for to pay off this debt, so she's kind of living paycheck to paycheck and not doing well for herself. But Paul notes, that he needs a payment at this time, and he's not going to leave without getting something. And the narrator reveals that that Paul gave Samantha a choice between a half of her pinky or $10,000. And Samantha didn't have the money, so she chose half of her pinky, which hurt, but not as much as she thought it was going to hurt. And she goes to the hospital. They ask what happened. She says it was a preparing food kind of injury, but they note that the injury is too clean, and they send some police officers back with her to her apartment. They can't seem to find the pinky, although they do find the blood. And they don't find Paul Horvath at all. He seems to have gotten away. The police eventually leave because she's not really filing a report or anything like that. And Samantha, as the story comes to a close, she's looking at her finger, seeing what has happened, and she wonders if she's going to be able to use another part, like finger or her hand, to pay off the remaining debt, because she now owes, like, it was $69,000 before, now it's $59,000 in student loan debt. She seems to have become okay with this pain and this method of payment, and that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there's a little bit worth talking about with debt. A very interesting idea for a story. There are a few problems with how the story plays out that prevent it from truly rising above. But LaValle does provide us with some to think about. One of the ideas of this story is that of Samantha's rough life. Samantha is struggling in every way possible. She's struggling professionally. Her job isn't going that well. She's not a teacher. She's a substitute teacher, probably not getting that many hours. She's at a rough school. One of the students pointed a gun at her in an effort to see her cry. And Samantha did cry, but it sort of made her sort of immune, or she's not as affected anymore by what she's encountering, and she doesn't really like being a teacher at this point. Living wise, things aren't going well. She's not living in her own place. She's living in a sublet, and this is from place to place to place to place. So she's not really staying in one place, which you kind of want that security of home life, which Samantha doesn't seem to be getting. Financially, she's not doing too well either. She's living paycheck to paycheck, and she owes a huge debt. So things are pretty tough for her, and she seems to own nothing for herself. She seems to have nothing. All the good things in her life are because of what she's subleasing. Someone will leave a chair or a couch or a bed or something, and she'll be able to sleep on that. Whereas she owns really nothing to her name. And it doesn't really seem like anyone can really help her. When someone comes calling and asks for her to give something of herself to pay for a debt, Samantha has nothing to give except herself. She can only give a body part. Thank goodness they didn't ask her to give her body, which is what I feel like in any other story you might see. And even in real life, you might see someone say, you got to pay for this with your body, which would not be good. That's pretty gross, and it's sex trafficking. It's not ideal. A world that seems to take and take and take and take from Samantha. And I think what LaValle is trying to do is highlight both the horrors of the student loan process. This was written in 2009 before it became a major crisis, but even in 2009, you could see that it was going to become a bigger problem. And then the horrors of capitalism as well, because this is all because of a capitalist system. Presumably some corporation gave Samantha the money, and now they want it back. So LaValle is critiquing both of those things within this story. LaValle is also offering some commentary on how we normalize pain. LaValle shows how quickly we adjust to pain and misery in this story, because Samantha loses a hand. That's the pain that exists for her in this story. She also has no real address. She's financially struggling. But all of that seems okay to her. She becomes used to it rather quickly. Kind of highlighting how human beings can adjust to anything, even if we necessarily shouldn't be adjusting to the most extreme things and the most extreme situations put on to us by maybe the people in power. So what's interesting is losing the finger hurts Samantha in this story, but she quickly rationalizes this new accounting. As the story comes to a close, the narrator notes she looks at her hand, sees that she has half a pinky, and she's like, what else can I give up with this system of accounting in order to pay the bills that I need to pay? Which doesn't seem like a real way that the loan shark would actually work. Eventually he would stop chopping things off because eventually the loan shark would want money back, because they wouldn't be able to use, or they wouldn't just accept body parts for $59,000. So she's rationalized this. It doesn't mean that that's actually going to happen for the foreseeable future, but she's learned that this is a way that she can sort of solve her problems, even though it's going to leave her disfigured, and it's practically going to amputate one or both of her hands. It's not ideal there, but we can normalize pain, especially if we're living in a very tough situation like this. Now, this story is very fascinating, but I do have a couple of issues in that I do think we're not given enough insight into who Samantha is. It just quickly sort of rushes past her and presents us with the situation. But I also feel like the story begins and ends too quickly. It could have been fleshed out to give us more substance here, to sort of highlight more about the system that exists, to flesh out the ideas. Because here, I think the ideas are there. It's just like they're more abstract. They're not as solidified as they could be to present a pretty powerful short story, or even something even longer than that. But I do have another question: is like, why would somebody be doing this for student loans? I don't think like the mafia gives out money for student loans. I think Samantha would have gotten it from the government or from some private company, and private companies tend not to like send out loan sharks or muscle enforcers to get money back. Like, I get that maybe this is a metaphor or analogy for other things that these companies kind of take from us, but I don't think like that the situation would ever happen. The realism is kind of taken away. And like, you can show if this were a science fiction story, like I can kind of see that. And this kind of tinges on horror, but also it doesn't lean far enough into horror to be horror. So I feel like there's a genre issue and also a realism issue, because I do think LaValle is trying to go for realism, but because the loan shark is coming by, it's like, when would this ever really happen? And maybe I'm missing the point here or something like that. I invite you to sort of like tell me what exactly I'm missing there. But I do think that's a inherent problem with this story that prevents it from rising above and being one of the more memorable short stories. One that really stands the test of time, I would say. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Debt by Victor LaValle, a pretty interesting short story, one that a little bit more work could have been done to it to make it really stand out and be a much more high quality short story. It is pretty good here, and I'll put a link to it in the description so you can find it. But again, I do think a little bit more could have been done. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. I would love to hear from you and potentially have a discussion about this, about something that I may have missed here. But other than that, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this short story or this author if they don't already know. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and hopefully not debt-ridden travels. Farewell.